Author's note. In the 1980 film, young Danny Torrance sends a desperate psychic message, his shine, to Dick Halloran in Florida, sparking the chain of events that brings Halloran to the Overlook Hotel. But what if that message never reached him? What if it landed somewhere unexpected? On a quiet porch in Colleyville, Texas, where a bulldog and a cat shared more wisdom and courage than anyone could have imagined. This novel explores that possibility. It honors the original characters and setting, while reimagining the final act through the eyes and paws of two unlikely heroes. What follows is what could have happened if someone else had answered the call. Charles Fernandez.
Chapter 1. Signals in the Smoke. The sun was beginning its lazy retreat behind the pear trees that lined the backyard of a modest suburban home in Colleyville, Texas. A dusty breeze stirred the air, carrying the scent of honeysuckle, old wood, and a faint trail of cigar smoke. On the shaded backyard porch, two figures lounged like sentinels of an age that had passed most animals and most men by. Moxie, a broad-shouldered brown and white American bulldog, chewed thoughtfully on a thick cigar, unlit for now, while her jowls twitched in suspicion. Her eyes locked on the chicken coop just beyond the yard. There, a raccoon with more ambition than brains was halfway through prying open the coop door with its dexterous little hands. "Again with this masked idiot," Moxie muttered through clenched teeth. A flicker of a memory crossed her mind. A smaller creature, cornered and afraid. She pushed it aside. Focus. Don Gato didn't look up. The orange tabby sat perched on the porch rail, legs crossed, a thin cigarette dangling from the corner of his mouth. He tapped the ash into a terracotta planter that hadn't held a living flower in years. His eyes were half-lidded, distant, like he was listening to a radio only he could hear. "Ignorance," he said, exhaling a long plume of smoke, "is a form of courage. Misguided, but brave." The air around him seemed to vibrate faintly. "But this is different, Moxie. Not a whisper in the wind. A child's mind, powerful and afraid. The Overlook calls, and it hurts to listen." Moxie growled low in her throat and lunged off the porch in a single bound. The raccoon squealed and tried to scramble away, but Moxie was faster. She barreled toward the coop with a thunderous bark that echoed through the yard like a cannonade. The raccoon flipped backward off the fence post and vanished into the brush, muttering curses in his own chittering tongue. "Coward!" Moxie barked, triumphant. "And stay out of here!" She returned to the porch, tail held high, chewing her cigar like it was a victory steak. "That's the 5th time this week," she grumbled, hopping back up beside Don Gato. "You'd think he'd learn." "Persistence," Don Gato said absently, "is the vice of the stupid." He still seemed distant, the air around him thrumming with unseen energy. Moxie snorted. "Yeah, well, he's about to learn what an American bulldog can do if I catch him one more time." He gave a slow nod, still not looking at her. His eyes were now distant for a different reason. "Something's coming," he said softly. "Something old. Something hungry." Moxie paused mid-chew. "What?" Don Gato finally turned to face her, and for the first time all day, his expression was not relaxed. It was grave. He reached out with a paw and tapped the side of his head. Through the shine, a signal, not just a whisper, a scream, a child's mind, powerful and afraid. His whiskers twitched, sensing a malevolence that made the hairs on Moxie's back rise. Moxie's tail went still. The warmth of the porch faded a notch. The scent of honeysuckle turned sickly sweet, then metallic. "You're sure it's not just noise?" she asked. "Could be a whisper of yesterday from one of your Past adventures? He shook his head. No. This one is real and loud. It feels wrong, Moxie. Like a wound in the world. Where's it coming from? Colorado, he answered. The mountains. An old place. Cold. Haunted. He closed his eyes. The Overlook. The name lingered in the air, heavy as thunderclouds. Even Moxie, who didn't claim to understand the metaphysical, knew that word had weight. It felt like a shiver down her spine, a prickling behind her eyes. A long silence passed between them. The sun dipped further, casting the porch in deep amber. A lone cicada sang out, then stopped, as if reconsidering. I hate the cold, Moxie muttered, breaking the silence. Don Gato stubbed out his cigarette on the wooden rail and pulled another from behind his ear. But he didn't light it. His gaze had turned inward, far away from Texas. He was thinking of a humid summer in New Orleans, years ago, where the air in the French Quarter had been so thick with the energy of the dead, it felt like walking through soup. He'd seen spirits there, faded, mostly harmless things that just wanted to be remembered. But those were ghosts of the past. This scream coming from Colorado was different. It wasn't a memory, it was a hunt. This was a living boy being cornered by something that didn't just want to be seen. It wanted to feed. But even then, in that place of restless spirits and suspicious miracles, he'd never felt the kind of psychic scream he felt now. This was darker, more desperate. But you hate bullies more, he said, lighting the cigarette at last. Moxie growled again, softer this time. A kid, huh? Don Gato nodded. Name's Danny. He's calling for help. Nobody else is listening. Moxie's expression tightened. How much time does he have? Don Gato closed his eyes, listening beyond the frightened voice. Images flashed through his mind. A long hallway, an axe, a door splintering beneath it. Not enough, he said. But some of what he's sending hasn't happened yet. The shine doesn't always know the difference between danger and the shadow it casts before it arrives. Moxie stood, her cigar gripped between her teeth, like a soldier preparing for a mission. Then we leave before the shadow catches him. Don Gato gave a satisfied flick of his tail. Then let's begin. The porch light above them flickered twice. No wind, no reason. Then, shoulder to shoulder, they stepped back inside the house. Quietly, purposefully, leaving behind the comfort of warm boards and suburban stillness. The road to Colorado and the haunted heart of the Overlook awaited. Chapter 2. Preparing for the journey. The moon had climbed high over Colleyville, pouring silver light onto the backyard like spilled mercury. The trees stood quiet. Pear, apple, fig, banana, and jujube, casting long shadows that shivered in the cool night wind. Moxie stood motionless on the porch, ears twitching at distant noises, a neighbour's sprinkler wheezing to life, a lone owl murmuring in the dark. Inside, the house lay still, as if it, too, was holding its breath. Don Gato stepped through the back door, with quiet grace nudging it open as he always does, shaking the porch dust from his paws. A faint tremor ran through him as he thought of the journey ahead. Not fear, but a deep unease. "Time's short," he said. "We leave within the hour." Moxie nodded. "We need food. Tools. That ratty green backpack." "I already found it," he said, flicking his tail. "And I loaded it with the essentials. 2 water bottles, a flashlight, jerky, beef and turkey varieties, and 1 emergency can of sardines. Olive oil and garlic flavour." She snorted. "That's not olive oil and garlic. That's mold." Flavour is subjective. They moved through the house with fluid purpose. Moxie opened the pantry with a careful nose nudge and retrieved an entire bag of dog biscuits, which she dropped next to the backpack. A pang of sadness hit her as she imagined leaving her warm bed. She pushed it down. Mission first. In case I get nostalgic. Don Gato had already climbed onto the kitchen counter, digging through the junk drawer with surgical precision. Out came a compass, a roll of duct tape, a Swiss Army knife that neither of them could technically use, and a crumpled, grease-stained road map from the early 2000s. Don Gato dragged the map down with a flick of his claw, then spread it across the kitchen tile, flattening the creases with sharp slaps of his paws. Not elegant, not graceful, but effective. He stared at it for a long moment, tail twitching in quiet rhythm. The map spanned a stretch from northeast Texas to the jagged spine of southern Colorado. Faded red lines for highways, dotted trails through national forests, elevation lines curling like fingerprints. He didn't read it like a human. No scanning left to right, no sounding out names, but he understood the symbols, the winding paths, the altitude markers, the little blue snowflake icons that meant danger, or at least don't go this way unless you're desperate or dumb. He tilted his head, eyes narrowing. Trail 4B splits near the ridge, he murmured. One side doubles back, one drops elevation fast. Moxie blinked. He read that. Some of it, he said, tapping a paw beside a jagged switchback. The rest I feel. He lowered his nose, breathing in the faint scent embedded in the folds. Printer ink, dust, and something older. Fear. Fresh. He closed his eyes and let the shine flicker in the back of his mind like a pulse in fog. When he looked up again, his ears were forward, his path chosen. North Ridge. There's a scent trail leading off the map's edge. It shouldn't be there, which means that's where we're going. Moxie gave a short, impressed huff. Show off. Don Gato folded the top edge down with his paw. Accurate show off. He tapped a route on the unfolded page. Colleyville to Raton, then we climb. Moxie scanned the red line curving through the map's mountains. That's a long way for two animals without thumbs. Thumbs are overrated, he said, tracing the route. We've got speed, stealth, and an unnatural sense of direction. The air in the room felt heavier, charged. She tilted her head. And where does this go again? To the Overlook. A chill crept into the room that had nothing to do with the AC. It felt like the house itself shuddered, a brief exhalation of dread. I hate the cold, she muttered, packing the biscuits with her teeth. Don Gato lit a fresh cigarette. Then think warm thoughts, like Mexico. He drifted for a moment, caught in a memory. San Miguel de Allende. Cobblestone alleys, flower-draped balconies, murals that seemed to breathe at dusk. He remembered a night spent hiding inside a puppet theatre, conversing with a blind fortune-teller who swore he could hear lies. They had exchanged riddles in Spanish until dawn. That city had shimmered with secrets, but even there, in its dreamlike warmth, he'd never felt the pull he felt now. This was colder, more insistent. Don Gato checked the supplies one final time, then paused. I was supposed to work with Simon on the mats tomorrow. Moxie looked up. He'll understand. He'll say he does. Don Gato glanced toward the detached garage, now dark and empty. He thinks I'm teaching him too slowly. Are you? Don Gato was quiet for a moment. I'm trying to keep him alive long enough to grow up. Moxie studied him, understanding more than he had said. Then you can give him his next lesson when we get back. Don Gato nodded slowly. When we get back. Back in the kitchen, Moxie finished zipping the backpack and slung it over her shoulders. It fit snug between her shoulder blades like armor. Let's go. They stepped out the front door, not because they needed to, but because leaving through the back felt too symbolic, too final. The street was quiet, bathed in sodium light. A possum blinked at them from under a mailbox and wisely backed away. We walking or hitching? Moxie asked. We walk to the outskirts, Don Gato replied. Then we hop a ride. Colleyville after midnight was a strange place. Familiar homes looked older. Driveways felt too long. The wind carried the faint sound of distant barking, as if dogs everywhere had begun to whisper. They passed a church where a marquee read, "Fear not the valley." Don Gato eyed it. A bit on the nose. Moxie snorted. That valley ever been to the Overlook? Halfway through town, they reached an empty service road where power lines stretched like skeletal arms. A rusted pickup sat idling at a gas station. Its driver slumped over the wheel, snoring through a bean burrito coma. "This guy's got a full tank and no idea we're about to borrow his bed," Don Gato said. "Borrow or hijack?" "Depends on the route." They slipped silently into the truck bed and nestled between bags of mulch and lawn chairs. The engine roared to life moments later, and they were off, bouncing gently as the town faded behind them. Moxie lay still, her head resting on the backpack. A wave of loneliness washed over her, but she focused on the feel of the road beneath the truck. "Gotta stay sharp." "You ever think about staying?" she asked suddenly. "Staying?" "Like, not going. Letting someone else answer the call." Don Gato was silent for a beat. Then, "I've thought about what happens if we don't." She nodded, her tail twitching. "Same." The pickup rolled westward, toward Weatherford. Streetlights gave way to moonlight. Billboards rose and fell like forgotten prayers. By dawn, they were miles from home. A livestock auction barn loomed ahead, quiet now, but always littered with movement in the early morning. The truck stopped briefly to unload feed. They slipped out unnoticed and wandered through the gravel lot until they found a vendor warming his hands near a food stand. "Bacon?" Moxie asked, sniffing. Don Gato nodded. "Steal us a strip. I'll get the map." She darted into the shadows, tail low. Moments later, she returned, chewing noisily on something that smelled like sin. "I love this country," she said. Don Gato, now balanced atop a vending machine, unhooked a laminated state map pinned to the wall beside the restroom. He dropped down beside her. "From here, we find a rig heading north. Then we ride." "How do you know this plan will work?" He paused, putting out a coin from the lining of the backpack, a silver Jaguar medallion from Salvador, Brazil. "I don't," he said, "but the shine does." Moxie stood, brushing gravel from her fur. "Then lead the way, Cat." The wind picked up. They turned north. The journey had officially begun. Chapter 3. Highway Hounds and Boxcar Whiskers. The Texas Panhandle went on forever. Flat, dry, and so hot it seemed to buzz. Moxie and Don Gato sat in the shade beneath an overpass near Dumas. The overpass groaned with passing trucks, engines rumbling like angry animals overhead. Wind kicked up, a tumbleweed stumbled by like a spectator with no place to be. "We need something faster," Moxie said, eyeing the highway. The heat shimmered off the asphalt in waves, making her eyes ache. But she pushed past the discomfort. "Gotta focus. These pickups are too slow, too local." Don Gato scratched behind his ear with the precision of a philosopher ruminating on metaphysics. The air vibrated with the relentless energy of the road. "Agreed. We're entering the long-haul zone now. This is freight territory. We need something big, bold, and blind." Blind? To the fact they're giving 2 animal hitchhikers a ride through 3 states. A horn blared in the distance. A long red and white semi hissed onto the shoulder, brakes squealing like a banshee. The side read, "Whistler's Produce. We bring the crunch to the country." Moxie's ears perked. "Crunch, huh? Sounds promising." They waited as the driver, A thick-jawed man in aviators stepped down to check his tires. He walked a slow circle around the truck, grumbling about valve stems and rattling lug nuts. He whistled off-key and carried a coffee thermos that smelled like road rage and powdered creamer. Don Gato nodded toward the back. "Time it." Moxie bolted across the gravel and leapt into the produce trailer with fluid grace. Don Gato followed in a flash of orange, slipping between two crates of cantaloupes as the door slammed shut behind them. The engine roared, and they were moving. Inside, the temperature was cool and dim. Crates of fruits and vegetables lined the walls, stacked in orderly rows. Apples, lettuce, and Roma tomatoes shared space with celery and onions. Somewhere near the back, a crate of garlic had split open, its smell carving through the rest like a knife. "Well," Moxie said, sniffing, "at least it smells better than the hay." Don Gato climbed atop a box of tomatoes and lit a fresh cigarette. The truck's vibrations resonated through him, a low thrum of contained power. "We've got 12 hours of road, low visibility, and a full tank of caffeine on our side. We make Raton by sunrise." "Raton?" Moxie asked. "What's in Raton?" "The edge," he said. "New Mexico's threshold. Once we cross it, we're in range of the hotel." Moxie's brow furrowed. A shiver ran through her, despite the cool air. The Overlook was getting closer. She could feel it. "We're still hours from the snow. Don't seem right, a hotel like that buried in ice while we're baking in tomato fumes." Don Gato exhaled a slow plume of smoke. "The Overlook isn't bound by geography. It lives in intersections of place and memory, warmth and decay. The closer we get, the more real it becomes, the more now it feels." Moxie sat back on her haunches, chewing the end of her cigar. "Sounds like a nasty rash." "Or a god with a grudge," Don Gato murmured. The truck shuddered, as if agreeing. A long silence followed as the semi barreled westward. Outside, the flat plains rolled by like an ancient film strip. Mesquite, silos, fences, dust. Inside, the produce trailer held its breath, cold and still. Don Gato's thoughts drifted, not forward but back. He remembered Manaus, deep in the Brazilian Amazon. A black river, wide as ruin, had once carried him past wooden huts and floating cathedrals. There had been a tapir named Vasco who believed the jungle was a library and every route a sentence. They'd spoken under moonlight, the hum of insects forming a kind of code. But even in that tangled world of myth and vine, the pull of the shine had never been like this. This was older, sharper, hungrier. "I don't like it," Moxie said, breaking the silence. Her voice was low but firm. "You're not supposed to," he replied. "It means it's working." They rode in silence for another hour before the truck began to slow. Through the slats, they saw signs for Raton, exit 450, then 453. Don Gato stood and stretched, cigarette ash scattering into a crate of carrots. "End of the line," he said. "Next step's rail." The produce truck offloaded at a depot on the outskirts of town. As the back door opened, Moxie and Don Gato slipped out unnoticed, their movements practiced and silent. They darted across the gravel lot, past stacked pallets and forklifts coughing diesel smoke, until they reached a fence line. Beyond it, the train yard. Boxcars stretched like sleeping beasts under sodium lights. Some were open, some were sealed. All of them whispered potential. "Rails faster than road," Don Gato said. "If we catch one heading north, we'll hit the high country by midnight." "Don't see a schedule posted," Moxie said, scanning the tracks. "We don't need one," he said. "We need a smell." Moxie's nose twitched. Coal, rust, grease, sweat, trail mix. Bingo. A freight crew was prepping a northbound train, its cars open and loosely guarded. The pair crept close under cover of dusk, slipping through a narrow gap in the fence. They found an open container filled with lumber and climbed in. Moxie exhaled heavily.
This place smells like a broken pencil.
Then breathe through your mouth, Don Gato said. As the train lurched into motion, Moxie lay flat between the boards, ears low and eyes forward. Don Gato remained upright, balanced on the edge of a beam, his cigarette glowing like a sentinel in the dark. The train picked up speed, carrying them into the wilderness. That night, the wind grew colder. The pine trees thickened. The stars hung lower as if watching. Moxie couldn't sleep. Her muscles ached and her heart beat faster than usual. But she refused to yield. Gotta stay vigilant. There was electricity in the air, like the moment before lightning. Don Gato sat silently, his eyes reflecting not moonlight, but something older.
The Overlook is aware of us, he said. Moxie tilted her head.
You mean it knows we're coming? I mean it doesn't want us to. She didn't respond at first. The weight of his words pressed on her chest like an invisible paw. Then let's make it want us less. Her voice was steady, but her eyes burned with a fierce determination. They both stared ahead, toward the mountains now visible on the horizon, grey and hulking like frozen giants. Snow dusted their peaks. Cold bit the air. A faint voice whispered again in the edge of their minds. Please, help me. It was Danny, still alive, still hoping. Moxie stood. Hang on, kid. Don Gato flicked his cigarette into the wind. We're coming. Chapter 4. Cold shadows and waking whispers. By dawn, the freight train cut through the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, metal screaming on the rails as the landscape shifted from hard desert brush to icy rock and dense pine. The air was sharper now, meaner. The snow line crept close like a warning drawn in chalk across the earth. Moxie sniffed the wind and didn't like what she smelled. It wasn't just the cold, it was something else, something ancient and predatory. This place stinks of secrets, she muttered, her breath misting in front of her. Not just bad memories, something older. A shiver went through her, and she briefly thought about the benefits of her dog treats for handling stress, but pushed the thought aside. Stay focused. Don Gato perched atop a timber beam, his cigarette glowing faintly in the morning haze. He hadn't spoken for an hour. His ears were angled just slightly, like they were tuned to a signal no one else could hear. The silence pressed in, heavy with the weight of unseen eyes. We're in Colorado, he said at last. Moxie looked around. You sure? He tapped the cigarette against the boxcar wall, ash falling into the crevices. My tale's never wrong north of the border. The train slowed near a siding station just south of Trinidad. It wasn't stopping for long, just enough to swap conductors and refill coffee. Moxie didn't wait. She leapt from the boxcar and landed in the snow with a crunch. The cold bit at her paws, but she barely registered it. Danny's waiting. Don Gato followed silently, his paw prints impossibly delicate on the frost. They didn't look back. The town still slept, the streets washed in the pale glow of sodium lights. Locals shuffled into diners and gas stations like ghosts mimicking routine. A snowplow growled in the distance, clearing slush from a road no one seemed interested in traveling. We need transport, Don Gato said. The real climb begins now. They followed the scent to a lodge on the town's edge, where log cabins stood in uneven rows beneath pine trees leaning too closely together. Snow had nearly swallowed the wooden sign out front. Behind a sagging kennel, a pack of huskies paced restlessly, their howls cutting through the roar of the gathering blizzard. Moxie's nose twitched. Musk, fur, frozen pine, and something else. Fear. A scarred older female stepped forward from the pack. Her name was Coda. Her ice-blue eyes held the hard-earned caution of an animal that had survived more than one brutal winter. She met Don Gato's gaze. For a moment, neither moved. An understanding passed between them, carried on the same unseen current that had brought Danny's cry to Don Gato. Coda saw Danny's fear. She felt the Overlook's hunger and understood that somewhere beyond the storm, a child was waiting for help. A low growl rose in her chest. It was not a warning. It was an agreement. Moxie pushed through a drift beside the kennel and uncovered an old sled, half buried in snow and ice. Its runners were frozen to the ground, and its leather straps had stiffened in the cold. Whoever had abandoned it had left in a hurry. Shovels lay scattered nearby. One of them snapped at the handle. Together, Moxie and Coda's pack pulled the sled free. Don Gato searched a nearby storage shed and emerged dragging a weathered tarp, a foil bag of jerky, and a cracked emergency radio. The radio gave off a faint hiss of static, weak but alive. Coda's pack, 6 lean shadows in the snow, slipped into the old harnesses with instinctive precision. Don Gato climbed aboard and secured the tarp and supplies. Moxie took her place beside the sled, ready to clear the path with her strength. Coda surged forward. The runners broke through the ice and sliced across the snow. Moxie bounded alongside them, breath steaming, while Don Gato perched at the front with his whiskers raised to the wind, following Danny's psychic pulse like a heartbeat in the dark. Pines loomed overhead like eavesdropping monks. A snow bridge buckled, the sled tilted. Moxie's snarl steadied Coda, who veered just in time to avert disaster, claws scraping ice. False whispers mimicked Danny's voice, tempting a wrong turn. But Moxie's nose caught the scent beneath the snow. Oil and rot. The Overlook's truth. The ridge rose, and there it was. High on a distant ridge, shrouded in mist, framed by dead trees and clouds, the Overlook Hotel. It rose like a wound carved into the mountainside. Dark windows, stone walls, roof pitched like a sneer. Even from miles away, it felt wrong. Too angular, too symmetrical. Like it had been built according to the rules of something that didn't understand humans but wanted to trap them. Don Gato stared. It's awake. Moxie squinted. It looks empty. It's not. It's waiting. The air around them seemed to vibrate, a low hum that resonated in their bones. They pressed forward. The trail narrowed, winding through a frozen forest. Shadows moved where they shouldn't. Birds didn't sing. Even the wind felt unnatural, rising and falling with no cause, like a breath held too long and then exhaled in a shiver. As they approached the final stretch through the woods, the terrain turned vicious. Ice-slicked curves, fallen branches, and a narrow bridge of snow over a ravine that whispered as they crossed it. Moxie ran beside the sled, forcing her aching paws to grip the frozen ground. Every sharp turn strained her legs, but she refused to slow down. And then, they crested the final ridge and reached the edge of the pine forest. There it stood, the Overlook. Closer now, real, enormous. The hotel's windows were like unblinking eyes. Coda halted at the forest's edge, refusing to go any farther. She would not cross onto the property, would not breach the invisible line where snow became silence and the land bent inward toward the Overlook's grip. Moxie nuzzled her. A vow passed in silence. Don Gato swiped the radio, stirring it from silence. The static built to a scream. A beacon flung into the dark, chasing a path only the shine could follow. The sled waited in the snow as they crept toward the hotel. Behind them, their tracks disappeared beneath falling snow. The threshold. The entrance loomed like a mouth. The handle was rusted but clean. The door opened easily. Too easily. It didn't creak. It didn't groan. It welcomed, but not like a host, like a spider. The hallway beyond was long and narrow, lined with tile that gleamed under flickering lights. The air was cold and sterile, but there was something under it, a smell not quite alive, not quite dead. Moxie sniffed. No mold? No rot? Don Gato narrowed his eyes. It's trying not to smell. The silence here felt deliberate, like a trap waiting to be sprung. They moved deeper. The light behind them faded faster than it should have. The floor creaked beneath Moxie's weight, but stayed silent under Don Gato's paws. This place was built to trap people, she whispered. It wasn't built, Don Gato corrected. It grew. They passed storage rooms, offices, a laundry chute that breathed slightly. Somewhere, music played, soft jazz, warped like a tape left in the sun. A saxophone made of fog. They turned a corner and found a small lounge, furnished but untouched. Dust lay evenly over the chairs, but there were no footprints. The fireplace was cold. A chessboard sat between two leather armchairs, mid-game. The Black Queen had been knocked over. Don Gato studied the pieces. This wasn't for humans. What do you mean? It plays with itself. It builds the illusion of guests. So when real ones arrive, they fall right in. Moxie walked to the fireplace. No heat, no ashes, no fire ever lit. She turned back toward the hall. Let's keep moving. I can feel the kids' trail, faint but there. As they stepped out of the lounge, the lights flickered. Don Gato paused. Did you feel that? He asked. What? Time just skipped. She looked at him. Come again? We walked out a second ago, but the hallway's different now. The shadows are wrong. Moxie's eyes narrowed. It moved the walls. No, Don Gato said. It moved us. The Overlook was testing them, twisting their perception of reality. She growled low in her throat. Next time it tries that, I'm biting the carpet. They pressed on. The hall bent subtly, too subtly. It led them back toward the kitchen. The air was thicker here, heavier. And then they heard it. A laugh, childlike, distant. Danny. Moxie broke into a trot. Don Gato followed, slower, watching the walls. They turned left, then right, then another left. The laugh echoed again, closer. Then silence. Then a whisper in Don Gato's ear. You don't belong here, Gato. You were never meant to be brave. He stopped cold. What is it? Moxie asked, turning back to him. It's trying to talk to me directly. His voice was low, a thread of warning in it. What's it saying? He smiled without humor. That I should go home, Moxie growled. Tell it you'll leave when you're good and ready. I already did. They came to a staircase, grand, sweeping, familiar. It led to the main floor, the true heart of the hotel. Don Gato flicked his tail. No more whispers, no more invitations. Moxie's eyes burned. Let's knock. And together, shoulder to shoulder, they climbed. The house held its breath. The nightmare was ready to begin. The wind had died. Not faded, died. Don Gato flicked his tail. No more whispers. No more invitations. Chapter 5. Welcome, said the spider. One moment, the wind screamed through the forgotten hallways like a jealous spirit, and the next it was gone. leaving only a silence that pressed against their ears like cotton soaked in dread. The snow that had clung to their fur melted soundlessly as Moxie and Don Gato crept deeper into the overlook. The building no longer loomed behind them. It surrounded them, thick with a presence too large, too silent, too still. Moxie squinted at the pale corridor ahead. Feels like it's holding its breath. She could feel the weight of its gaze, a malevolent curiosity that prickled her fur. "It is," Don Gato murmured. "It knows we're here." His tail twitched, sensing the overlook's awareness. A service hallway stretched before them, its door left ajar as though it had expected them. No squeal, no groan, no hesitation. It welcomed. The corridor was lit by pallid bulbs that buzzed faintly, like insects trying to die quietly. The air was wrong, not stale or damp, just absent. No scent, no warmth. The tile beneath their paws was yellowed linoleum, cracked like dried skin. At the far end, a rust-coloured freight elevator sat in silence, pulsing faintly, like it was listening. "I'll take point," Moxie offered, her muscles flexing. A surge of protectiveness coursed through her. "Gotta keep him safe." "No," Don Gato said, tail low. "You're stronger, yes, but this place tests the soul before the body. I'll go first." She hesitated, then gave a short nod. They moved forward. A light fixture above them creaked. The pair barely had time to glance up before the glass shade slipped free, shattering at their paws. The bulb inside flickered once, then steadied. Don Gato looked at the ceiling. "Loose fittings," he said with one eyebrow raised. Moxie didn't answer. The chain hadn't snapped. It had been unscrewed. They continued onward, one step at a time. Behind them, the corridor rearranged itself. Walls bent, corners re-angled. Doors they had passed vanished. The layout of the building rippled like a dream misremembered. Don Gato lit a cigarette, and the smoke curled sideways instead of rising. It wavered unnaturally, as if unsure of the air around it. "Already working on us," he muttered. Moxie sniffed. "Can't smell anything, not even dust." "That's the point," Don Gato said. "It doesn't want us to know where we are, or when." The hotel was disorienting them, stripping away their senses. They neared the main lobby. The lights above flickered, not violently but softly, suggestively. Moxie caught a glimpse in the flicker. Something red, a blur, a shape, gone. Don Gato stopped in front of a wall-mounted mirror, hanging crookedly. "Don't linger," he said. "They show things you might have been, or might still become." Moxie glanced at her reflection. At first, it was just her, steady, scarred, proud. Then her mouth began to stretch into something wide and wolfish. Her eyes blackened, and her teeth lengthened, wet with blood not her own. A voice whispered in her mind, "Let go. Embrace it." She snarled and looked away fast. "You weren't kidding." "No," Don Gato said. "I don't in here." They crossed through a gleaming industrial kitchen. Counters were spotless. Pots were too clean. The utensils hung in perfect lines, too perfect. It was sterile, but it felt prepared, like it had dressed itself up just for them. A bell rang once from somewhere deeper in the hotel. Not from a front desk or a service station, from somewhere within. "Invitation," Don Gato whispered. "Declined," Moxie growled. They passed through a hallway lined with fading floral wallpaper. Half the bulbs were dead. The rest flickered in sync with their breathing. Don Gato noted a peculiar pattern. The lights brightened on inhale, dimmed on exhale. "Always breathing," he said. "Then let's choke it," Moxie replied. A turn appeared where none had existed. They took it. The corridor now sloped downward, barely perceptible but unmistakable. The Overlook was folding in on itself, guiding them, herding them like animals toward something. They reached a door. Room 113. Scratched, gouged, scarred with panic. The wood bore the marks of claws and keys, and perhaps worse. "It's bait," Don Gato said. "I don't like bait," Moxie replied. But her eyes lingered on the door, a flicker of unease in their depths. A low whimper drifted from behind the door, a sound that made Moxie's ears twitch. It wasn't Danny's voice, but it carried a desperate urgency that tugged at her protective instincts. The scent of old flowers and something metallic, like dried blood, wafted from the crack beneath the door, a disturbing invitation. But before they could move on, the door creaked open on its own. A soft voice called out, "Moxie?" They froze. It was a child's voice. Danny's voice. "No," Don Gato said. "It's not him. It's what wants us to think it is." Still, Moxie took a step toward the room before Don Gato blocked her with his tail. "Don't," he said. "You know better," Don Gato murmured. "It's not just pretending. It's studying us." Moxie nodded reluctantly. The door swung wider, revealing a glimpse of the room's interior. It was small, cramped, the walls covered in faded wallpaper depicting cartoon animals with unsettlingly large eyes. A single overturned chair lay in the center, and a dim light flickered from a bedside lamp, casting long, distorted shadows that danced like figures in a nightmare. "Please, help me," the voice whispered again, closer now, laced with a tremor of fear. "It's cold in here. So cold." They walked on. The floor grew tacky, as though it resented their movement. The lights began to grow warmer, not inviting, but feverish. The air thickened. Moxie's breath quickened. Don Gato lit a second cigarette and noted the ash never hit the floor. It vanished, devoured by the air. Then the hall opened into the main lobby. It was impossibly vast, larger than the footprint of the building should allow. A grand chandelier swayed slowly above them, though there was no breeze. The reception desk stood abandoned. Behind it, a key wall displayed hundreds of hooks, each holding a single identical key. A guest book sat open on the counter. Don Gato padded forward and looked down. Only one word filled every line. "Welcome." Dozens of times. Moxie looked over his shoulder. "Creepy." Don Gato dipped his paw in the inkwell, pressed it in the center of the page, and whispered, "You missed your chance." They turned toward the stairwell and found it gone. In its place, an elevator. Its doors open, a red glow inside. Not blood, not exactly, but the suggestion of blood. The kind of color you associate with screaming. "You trust it?" Moxie asked. "No," Don Gato replied. "But we're not being given a choice." They stepped inside. The panel had no buttons, no numbers, no floor lights. A wave of cold washed over them, not from the air, but from the metal itself. It felt like touching a tombstone. The doors shut. A moment passed. Then the elevator dropped. No sound, no vibration, just a silent fall that made their stomachs lurch, as if gravity itself had forgotten them. Then the ceiling speaker crackled. "Welcome to the unremembered floor." "Perfect," Moxie muttered. Don Gato crouched low. "Hold your thoughts still. It's listening." He could feel a pressure building, not just in the air, but in his mind, as if the Overlook was trying to pry into his memories, looking for any fears he may have. The air in the elevator thickened, pressing against their minds. The elevator slowed. The doors opened. The hallway beyond was not a hallway. It was a memory, a fractured, bleeding one. The carpet was damp with something unseen. The walls pulsed like veins. Moxie looked left and saw her old home, her real one. Her owner's silhouette at the door, calling her name. "Moxie, come eat!" She shook her head and growled. Not real. Don Gato looked right and saw a street in Salvador, Brazil. Lanterns strung between. Buildings. A calico cat waiting at the base of a bell tower. "O Señor Don Gato?" she asked, her voice soft as incense smoke. He blinked. Not now. At the far end of the warped corridor sat a single shoe. Small. Worn. Don Gato pointed. Danny's trail. Moxie stepped forward. "Then that's where we go." Together they entered the hall, shoulder to shoulder. Behind them, the elevator doors vanished. Chapter 6. The Drawing Room. The deeper they pushed into the Overlook, the less it resembled a hotel and more a living maze. A nervous system unraveling, its synapses firing memories instead of electricity. Corridors stretched and narrowed. Doors vanished and reappeared. Rugs breathed. Chandeliers sighed. The very air conspired against them, thick and stale, like it had already been breathed by ghosts 1,000 times over. "I don't like this," Moxie muttered. "Feels like it's thinking about thinking." The Overlook pressed in, like a dare, like it was testing her will. Most dogs might have stopped, might have turned around. Moxie bared her teeth. Not me, she thought, and she kept walking. "It is," said Don Gato. "It's adjusting, studying us." His senses were on high alert. The hotel's shifting reality, a puzzle he was trying to solve. They rounded a corner and found a tall set of double doors flanked by decaying cherub statues. Above them, a tarnished brass plate read, "The Drawing Room." The doors opened slowly, almost apologetically, without a sound. Inside, the drawing room was an anachronistic theatre of restraint. Grand but faded, plush but threadbare. Velvet chairs with stuffing bulging from their arms sat in a circle like mourners. Walls of charcoal portraits, some familiar, some not. A central table held a single sketch pad and a lone pencil, arranged like a séance awaiting a medium. Don Gato's fur lifted slightly along his spine. "It's waiting for something." "Us?" Moxie asked. Before he could answer, the pencil rolled across the table. Then it stood on its point. The pencil began to move. It glided smoothly across the paper, guided by an invisible hand and moving with an almost elegant precision. First came the outline of an orange cat, then a broad-shouldered bulldog beside him. The likenesses were simple but unmistakable. Around Don Gato, the pencil drew balconies, crowded courtyards, and faces turned toward him in admiration. Around Moxie, it drew a warm kitchen, a familiar couch, and her toy box of chew toys. A dark line appeared between them. The pencil's movements quickened. It pressed harder, carving the line deeper until the paper began to tear. On the final page, the pencil drew a small boy seated at the center of a magnificent banquet table. Smiling men in elegant tuxedos and women in flowing evening gowns surrounded him. Their faces appeared warm and kindly, and their hands extended toward the boy in welcome. Crystal chandeliers glowed overhead, and above them, in graceful curling letters, the pencil wrote, "Welcome home, Danny." Moxie stepped closer. "That's Danny." Don Gato studied the smiling figures gathered around him. Something about their expressions was too perfect, too carefully arranged. And those are not his friends. The pencil snapped. The doors slammed shut behind them. The charcoal portraits lining the walls shimmered, their dark surfaces slowly turning into glass. Mirrors. Dozens of them. The floor split between Moxie and Don Gato, and darkness surged upward, separating them. The room had drawn its plan. Now it began to carry it out. Don Gato, the mirrors. Each panel showed a different version of him. Older, younger, injured, elegant, deranged. In one, he was surrounded by students beneath a lantern-lit arch in Salvador, chalking cryptic lessons in feline script. In another, he wore a monocle, speaking to a crowd from atop a mahogany desk. Then, his favourites. The mirrors that didn't just show him, but those beside him. Reina, Esteban. The others who had once called him El Señor Don Gato. Students, companions, believers. "You could have stayed," a voice whispered, smooth as oil. He turned. No one there. You belonged in the city, among admirers, not in this ice-ridden mausoleum. "I left for a reason," he said, ears twitching. The reflections shimmered, vying for his attention. "Leadership suits you more than rescue." A mirror darkened, then flickered back on. Now he stood behind a lectern, applauded by animals wearing medals. Moxie nowhere in sight. "You were someone," the voice said, "before you followed a bulldog." He didn't flinch. "She's worth following. She will fall." The mirror showed Moxie cornered, snarling, overwhelmed. Don Gato turned his back on the mirror. "You cannot save the boy. You're too small, too soft." "I've been many things," he muttered, "but never soft." The corridor buckled and collapsed into darkness. Moxie, the kitchen. She found herself in a sunlit kitchen. Her kitchen. The real one, where the mornings smelled of scrambled eggs and bacon, where nostalgic music was always played. There he was, her human, back turned, cooking eggs and bacon in the same skillet he always used. The scent was exactly right. Grease, pepper, something a little burned. "Hey, pretty bulldog," he said, just like he always says. Her heart twisted. A wave of longing washed over her, but she resisted. Illusion. But something was off. Too quiet. No birds outside. No footsteps from the other rooms. Just him. And her. She stepped forward, wary. "You're not him." "Sure I am," he said without turning. "You've done enough. Come home. Nobody will blame you." She stared at his back. "He's in Mexico," she said slowly. "With the rest of my family." The figure hesitated, only for a second. And when he turned, his face was smooth and blank. A placeholder. "You could rest," the imitation said. "Just go curl up on your blanket. This mission, it's not yours anymore." She squared her stance. "He didn't ask me to come back. He trusts me to finish what I started." The illusion began to dissolve. The kitchen peeled away like wallpaper, revealing a tiled kennel. The sound of distant barking echoed from somewhere beyond the walls. Moxie froze. For an instant she was small again, cornered, afraid. A puppy pressed against the back of a kennel, while larger shadows moved beyond the bars. The memory had followed her for years, surfacing in flashes whenever she saw something smaller or weaker, trapped with nowhere to run. A voice moved through the darkness. "You never really left." Moxie lowered her head and planted her paws firmly against the tile. "I'm not in a kennel anymore." The floor cracked beneath her. The bars splintered and fell away. Moxie stepped forward into shadow. Moxie, human mama. Just when Moxie thought the room was settling into silence, another scene unfolded. Not with a bang, but a warmth that hit her chest like a memory she hadn't invited. She stood in the living room of her own house. Not the kitchen, not the yard. The living room, dimly lit, soft with late afternoon sun. And sitting cross-legged on the sofa, working on her computer and humming off-key to a song on her phone, was her human Moma. The scent hit first. Freshly brewed coffee, rich and earthy from the mug on the side table. Her mama looked up and smiled. "Hey, baby girl," she said gently. "Come sit. You've been running around out there. You must be tired." This wasn't temptation, it was comfort. The kind that didn't shout, the kind that whispered, "Stay." "Just lay down," her mama said, patting the space on the couch beside her. "You've done enough." For a terrible moment, Moxie believed it. The Overlook's pull was strong, a siren song of home. But then the scent of coffee turned sour. Plastic. Her mama's smile stiffened. "She never tells me to stop," Moxie whispered. "She reminds me why I go." The room flickered. Coffee mug gone. Skin smooth where features should be. "You ain't her," Moxie said with finality. "You don't get to wear her face." The illusion cracked and fell away. Don Gato, cities of memory, salt and sunshine. Don Gato opened his eyes and found himself sitting at a cafe table on cobblestones warmed by Caribbean heat. Cartagena surrounded him in bright pastels. Flowers spilled from balconies and cumbia drifted through the narrow streets. A cafecito steamed beside him. On the balcony above sat an elderly tortoiseshell cat with gold rings in her ears and pale green eyes that had never seemed entirely blind or entirely focused on the present. Don Gato remembered her. The soothsayer. "El Señor Don Gato," she called down. "You left without saying goodbye." "I've been accused of that before. And you will be again." She leaned over the railing, studying something behind him that he could not see. "I warned you once about houses that learn your name," she said. "They do not call because they love you. They call because they are hungry." Don Gato's eyes narrowed. "Are you really here?" "Does it matter?" she replied. "The warning is real." A warm breeze swept through the street. The flowers changed first. Red became violet. The cumbia softened into jazz. Buildings stretched taller, balconies shifted, and the sea moved to the other side of the city. Cartagena folded into San Juan so smoothly that Don Gato could no longer tell where one memory ended and the next began. Then he saw her. Carmelita. A Siamese with moon-silver eyes and a voice like slow rain. She stretched languidly atop a sun-drenched balcony where bougainvillea spilled over the wrought iron. "El Señor Don Gato," she purred, her tail curling like a ribbon of smoke. "Still wandering, still bleeding for strangers. Que lástima. Some habits are worth keeping." "You had everything here," she said. "Warmth, respect, rhythm, rest." The street behind her shimmered. A courtyard appeared in the fading light. A dozen animals of every kind sat around a low table, watching as Don Gato stood atop it like a philosopher prince, telling stories of ancient battles and buried truths, his tail flicking with punctuation. They watched him with rapt attention, not out of politeness, but awe. The way one watches fire, music, and prophecy all at once. "They may have gathered for your charm," Carmelita whispered, "but they stayed for your mind, for your voice. They didn't merely admire you, Don Gato, they believed in you. And because of you, they began to believe in themselves." The animals in the courtyard began to applaud. "You could have this again," she continued. "All of it." Don Gato watched his former self accept their admiration. For a moment, the warmth felt real. So did the longing. Carmelita stepped down from the balcony without falling, drifting toward him as though the air had become a staircase. "Why return to the cold?" she asked. "Why follow a bulldog into a place that will swallow you both? Stay here. Be admired. Be remembered." Don Gato looked back toward the Cartagena balcony. The soothsayer was gone. Only her warning remained. Houses that learn your name are hungry. He turned to Carmelita. I do miss the sun. She smiled. Don Gato held her gaze, but not the shadow it cast. Her smile stiffened. The courtyard darkened. The applause continued, but the animals no longer moved. Their paws struck together in perfect rhythm, again and again, like toys wound too tightly. You've mixed the cities, Don Gato said. Carmelita's moon-silver eyes turned black. You had so many, she replied. We assumed you wouldn't notice. That was your mistake. Cartagena cracked. San Juan peeled away. The balconies, flowers, and applauding crowds collapsed into mildew, cold stone, and a hallway that refused to remain still. Carmelita vanished like steam. Don Gato faced his reflection in the darkened glass. Still walking, he said quietly. Together. They found each other in a spiraling corridor that hadn't been there a moment before. Don Gato's whiskers twitched. Moxie's eyes were hard. You good? She asked. He nodded. The mirrors tried to flatter me. Then Cartagena did. Mine offered bacon and mama. He raised a brow. That's low. Real low. They walked on. Moxie suddenly slowed, staring at a trail of wet footprints leading down the hall. Fresh. Too fresh. She looked at Don Gato. These were just made, she murmured. He nodded once, his tail sweeping low. Don Gato froze. Ahead, the hallway didn't end in a door, but in a perfect recreation of the detached garage back home. Sitting on the mats was Simon. The kitten looked smaller than usual, his orange fur matted, and he was struggling to perform a basic technique they had practiced a dozen times. Simon, what are you doing here? Don Gato demanded, his tail lashing. You should be in Texas. Simon didn't look up. His voice came out hollow, echoing off the hotel walls. You never take me with you on your adventures. You say I'm not ready. But look at where we are, Gato. The world is moving, and I'm still stuck on the mats. Moxie stepped forward, her hackles raised. Gato, don't listen. It's the hotel. It's reading your mind. The vision of Simon finally looked up, and his eyes were voids of hotel blackness. You aren't protecting me, Don Gato. You're stifling me. Because you're afraid that if I actually learn what you know, you'll become obsolete. Or worse, you're afraid I'll die because you didn't teach me fast enough. Which is it? The training room began to shrink, the bookshelves leaning in like teeth. The illusionary Simon stood up, his shadow stretching long and monstrous across the floor. You kept me in the shallow end while the tide was coming in. If I drown, it's because you kept my paws tied. Don Gato felt a cold weight in his chest, the specific guilt of every time he'd told the kitten, not today, or next year. For a second, his focus slipped, and the mental fortitude he usually maintained flickered. I'm keeping you safe, Don Gato whispered, his voice cracking. Safe is just another word for unprepared, the vision hissed. Moxie didn't use words this time. She let out a short, sharp boof, nipped at Don Gato's ear. Not hard, but enough to break the trance. He's at home, Don Gato. He's probably napping on your favorite chair. He's safe because you didn't bring him. Now let's go make sure there's a world for him to grow up in. Don Gato took a long breath, the scent of the mats vanishing to be replaced by the hotel's rot. He looked at the spot where the vision had been. He is going to be insufferable when I tell him about this, Gato muttered, his eyes sharpening back to their tactical gold. But he will be ready for the next one. I'll make sure of it. They climbed a narrow stairwell that spiraled impossibly upward. With each step, the air thickened, heavy with a scent they couldn't place, something between ink and regret. At the top, the walls peeled back like paper. The hallway beyond was flawless, the boards ripped out, revealing a chasm of blackness. They leapt, one at a time, landing lightly on the remaining planks. Across the void stood a single door marked 237. A child's shoe sat in front of it. "Danny," Moxie whispered.
Don Gato's ears twitched.
"This isn't an invitation. It's bait." Moxie growled softly. "They don't know who they're dealing with."
Don Gato stepped forward and placed a paw on the door.
Behind them the Overlook groaned, wood stretching like bone, pipes rattling like breath in a dying throat. "I think we're getting close," he said. "Then let's knock." Together they pushed the door open, and the hotel exhaled, hungry. Chapter 7. The Unwelcome Invitation. The door creaked open, not with menace, but with melancholy, as if the wood itself regretted what lay beyond. As they moved through the threshold and looked across the room, they saw a half-open door revealing a tiled bathroom, the light flickering like it couldn't decide whether to reveal or conceal. The air reeked of damp rot and old perfume. Inside, a clawfoot tub sat half-filled with black water. In it, a rotten corpse of a woman who was sitting up. She slowly turned her head to look at them. Once eye contact was made, she began to grin. Slowly. Moxie stiffened. Don Gato stared. Her grin deepened. Eager. Cruel. But when Moxie lunged forward with a snarl, the door slammed shut on its own. "What was that?" she growled. "Something that doesn't belong among the living," Don Gato said. "Or even the dead." They stepped back into the hallway, but something was wrong. The corridor stretched longer than it had before. At the far end stood a set of heavy double doors that hadn't been there when they entered room 237. A brass plaque hung over a pair of large double doors. The Gold Room. Moxie growled low in her throat. "Another ballroom," Don Gato said, squinting down the warped hallway. "That wasn't here before." "Doesn't smell right," Moxie muttered. "Smells like mirrors and memory." "And perfume," Don Gato added. "Old, fading, but not gone." Faint jazz drifted from behind the doors, the music warbling like it came from a warped record. As they approached, confetti and streamers littered the floor. The closer they got, the thicker it became, like they were approaching a celebration that had never ended. They stepped through at the same time, shoulder to shoulder. This ballroom was not the same one from before. This was cleaner, pristine even. Chandeliers sparkled like teeth. The floor gleamed. A band played in the far corner, a slow and festive jazz melody. The space had no walls, just a shimmering black void beyond the parquet, as if reality itself unravelled at its edge. And in the middle stood a long banquet table, set for a party. The plates were bone white. The silverware gleamed, but the food, what food there was grotesque. Turkeys carved like grotesque human mannequins, jellied eyes wobbling on a porcelain tray. A punch bowl filled with something red that steamed but didn't ripple. A banner hung overhead, sagging slightly in the center. "Welcome home, Danny." Don Gato's fur bristled. They think he belongs to them. From the center of the spectral crowd, a figure began to part the guests, graceful, deliberate, like a maitre d' at a party that never ended. Not a real person, or perhaps it was. He straightened his tuxedo cuffs with theatrical care. "Grady's the name. Delbert Grady," he said smoothly, as though the name alone should answer questions no one had asked. "Though I suspect you're not here for pleasantries." His form flickered, tuxedo immaculate, voice smooth and courtly, but coiled with condescension. "Well," he said, "you've come far, haven't you? Little paws, big dreams." Moxie stepped forward, teeth bared. "Where is he?" Grady smiled. "He's with family. Why would you ruin that?" "Because it ain't his family," she said. "It's a freak show of ghosts." Grady bowed slightly. Words hurt, madam, especially when you're not invited. Then he gestured expansively. After all, everything is under control here. We don't need any meddlers interfering in matters that don't concern them. Right, Lloyd? He inclined his head toward the bartender, polishing a glass. The band began a new tune, less festive, more somber, menacing. The lights dimmed. From the far edges of the ballroom, where the chandeliers barely reached but warmth did not, more figures emerged. First the familiar ones. The woman from the bathtub, skin pallid and dripping. Lloyd, the bartender, still polishing a glass that would never come clean. Two identical girls, twins, approached hand in hand, eyes fixed forward, each wearing an identical grin. And behind them, the rest. The ballroom had filled. Dozens, maybe hundreds of ghostly attendees, once anonymous, now unmistakable. Men in tuxedos, women in satin gowns that clung to them like cobwebs, shimmering like reflections on water. Their smiles never reached their vacant eyes. They said nothing. Only the sound of jazz music drifted through the vast ballroom. Then, as if on cue, another man, well-dressed, balding, and bleeding from the crown of his head, raised what looked like a glass of wine and exclaimed, "Great party, isn't it?" They began to form a circle, slow, deliberate, tightening around the intruders. It was indeed a party. And our heroes were the entertainment. Don Gato stepped in front of Moxie. "If it's a waltz you want, I never miss a step." He struck first. A blur of orange fur, claws slashing across Grady's pressed shirt. The illusion wavered. Moxie lunged at the twins, knocking them backward like bowling pins. They didn't cry out, but hissed, evaporating into mist. The woman from the bathtub grabbed her with cold, soaked arms. Moxie twisted, drove her shoulder into the spectre's midsection, and sent her back into the darkness. Lloyd threw a bottle. Don Gato leapt, claws flashing, and swatted the glass mid-air. It struck the bartender square in the chest. Shattered. Gone. The lights began to strobe. The walls finally revealed themselves, covered in mirrors. Each panel showed not the fight, but Danny, alone, sitting quietly at a desk, whispering to someone unseen. Moxie turned, panting. "We have to get to him. Now!" Don Gato nodded. "This room's a distraction." They bolted for the far end, where the wall of darkness broke just enough to reveal another hallway. But as they reached the threshold, Grady's voice called after them. "You're too late." The hallway. The hallway beyond was tighter, closer. The carpet clung to their paws like wet velvet. The air pressed in, not cold, but suffocating. The only light came from flickering sconces, each one whispering Danny's name in a different tone. "Danny. Danny. Danny." They followed the whispers. The walls shifted. Moxie paused. "Wait, where's the ceiling?" Don Gato looked up. There wasn't one. Only stars, too many, wrong colours. They spun slightly, like an eye watching them through a telescope. "Don't look up," he said. "Don't tell me what to do," she growled, then looked up anyway, and immediately looked back down. "Not stars," she muttered. "Teeth." They ran. The hallway stretched, bent, tried to hold them, but they were faster now, more certain. They had faced the ghosts, faced the lies. There was only one thing left to do. Find Danny. The final door. At the end of the hallway stood a single door. Wooden, carved, beautiful in its simplicity. No number, no handle. But from behind it came a sound that made both their hearts seize. A boy's voice. Soft, frightened, but not broken. "Hello? Are you still there?" Moxie touched the door with her nose. "We're coming, kid." Don Gato pressed his paw beside hers. The door pulsed beneath them, and then it opened. Chapter 8. The Rescue. The door opened into stillness. No wind, no breath. No ticking of clocks or groaning of pipes. Just silence, a thick, suffocating stillness that wrapped around them like wool soaked in ice water. Moxie stepped in first, her paws landing on thick carpet that muffled her steps. Don Gato followed, his tail low and alert, eyes scanning the dimly lit room. The air itself felt heavy, expectant. It was a nursery. A large one, grand and eerie, like something built for a child who would never age. Pale blue walls, a mobile of crescent moons and stars, a crib too large for any infant and too soft for any child. Rocking horses that faced the corner, a wallpaper mural of mountains and rabbits and cheerful trees, the paint peeling around their painted smiles. The cheerfulness felt mocking, twisted. An unsettling feeling settled over Moxie, an echo of a distant sorrow. And in the centre of the room, seated on a small stool, was Danny. He looked older than he had in the fractured images carried through the shine. Not in years, but in exhaustion. He stared forward, unmoving, lips parted just enough to let whispers escape. He said he'd be back soon. He said it'd all make sense. His voice was thin, fragile, like glass about to break. His hands were clasped around a worn-out stuffed animal, a black bear missing one eye and most of its stuffing. His knees were pulled up. He didn't look at them when they entered. The room held its breath, waiting. But something was missing, an absence that tugged at the edges of Don Gato's awareness. "Danny," Moxie said softly. Her voice was gentle, a stark contrast to her usual gruffness. "Nothing." To anyone without the shine, it might have sounded like nothing more than the low rumble of a bulldog. Danny heard the words beneath it, clear and unmistakable. Still, he did not respond. Don Gato crept closer. "Danny, you called for help. I'm Don Gato. This is Moxie." That stirred something. Danny tilted his head slightly and stared at them. "I saw you," he whispered. His voice was a dry rasp. "In my head. I didn't know if you were real." Moxie stepped closer. "We're real, all right. And we're here." The boy looked up slowly. His eyes were sunken and glassy, but not empty. The shine was faint, but still there. A flicker of recognition became a spark of hope. "They said you wouldn't come," Danny whispered. "They said I'd be alone forever." Moxie nudged his leg with her nose. "They lied." Don Gato climbed onto the stool beside him. "You ready to leave this place? You're not alone anymore, Danny." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room as if searching for something unseen. Danny blinked. "Am I allowed?" He looked down at the stuffed bear in his lap, then back up at them. "My mom. She's still in here. Somewhere. I feel her." Moxie's ears perked. Don Gato's whiskers twitched. "Where?" Don Gato asked. Danny closed his eyes. The faint light of the shine stirred behind them. "A ballroom," he whispered. "Mirrors. Broken glass." His expression tightened. "No, it moved again. The hotel keeps hiding her from me." Moxie stepped closer. "We're not leaving her." "We won't," Don Gato said. He looked toward the hallway as the walls began to tremble. "But first we get Danny outside. Once he's beyond the hotel's reach, we come back for Wendy." Danny opened his eyes. "You promise?" Moxie's voice was low and absolute. "We promise." Danny gave a tiny nod as if sealing a pact. He looked up again, softer now. But me? Am I part of this?
Moxie stepped closer, her voice low but fierce.
You're invited, kid. This is your mission too. Her words hung in the air, defiant. The room shuddered. A groan rolled through the walls like a wave of pain. The mobile spun backward, its shadows twisting into monstrous shapes. The mural on the wall darkened, mountains rotting into jagged cliffs, trees bleeding sap, rabbits shrinking into shadows. The cheerful scene became a nightmare. He's waking up, Don Gato hissed. Not the hotel. Him, Jack. Its presence intensified, a malevolent force pushing against them. But something else was there too. A faint echo, a whisper beneath the roar. The escape. Danny stood, wobbling only slightly. Moxie pressed close against him, steadying his legs. Her body was a shield, her growls a low warning. Don Gato leapt ahead, checking the hallway. There's something else here. I can feel it, he muttered, half to himself. It had changed. It was no longer a corridor of lights and whispers, but of bone. Rib-like arches stretched overhead. The floor was soft and warm and pulsing. The Overlook had changed form, no longer a hotel, but a beast, a memory, a prison with skin. We run, Don Gato said. We get Danny outside, and then we come back for Wendy. His voice left no room for argument. Moxie barked once, sharp and commanding. Danny nodded, his jaw set. They bolted. Behind them, the walls cracked. Voices rose in chorus. Grady, the twins, Lloyd, the bathtub ghost, all screaming in protest, in hunger. The ceiling collapsed. They ducked. Flames erupted from the seams in the carpet. The walls wept blood. Doors opened onto voids that screamed. The Overlook was throwing everything it had at them, and yet they kept moving. Through the winding halls, past shattered mirrors, down staircases that breathed, until they reached the lobby. It was unrecognizable. The desk was gone. The chairs were gone. In their place, a swirling storm of memories. Jack's axe buried in a door. Wendy screaming through snow. The Overlook's fury was a vortex of pain and rage. The storm surged toward them. Moxie spun. I got this. She leapt into the chaos, tearing at images, swiping at ghosts with teeth and rage. A whirlwind of fur and fury. Don Gato herded Danny forward. The door! Look! The front doors were there, wide open. Snow blew in, real and raw. Danny hesitated. What about Moxie? His voice was filled with fear and concern. She'll follow, Don Gato said, but his voice cracked. He wasn't sure. Once you're safe, we're going back for your mom. Moxie turned. Behind her, the ghosts gathered one last time. Grady reached for her. She twisted mid-leap and latched onto his leg. Go! Get him outside! She shouted through clenched jaws. Her eyes blazed with defiance and a desperate hope. Danny stumbled through the doors. Don Gato followed, glancing back at Moxie, then looking around frantically. The wind hit them like truth. Outside. The Overlook let out a sound no building should ever make. A low, guttural moan, like a wounded animal being forced to wake from a dream it liked too much. The snow swirled hard, blinding and cold. Moxie burst through the door a heartbeat later, smoke rising from her back. Her knee, the old one that never healed quite right, had taken a hit and now dragged behind her like a promise she'd refused to break. But her eyes blazed with triumph. She tackled Danny into the snow, licking his face before collapsing beside him. Exhaustion dragged at her limbs, but Danny was safe. One victory. Now they had to get his mother back. Don Gato limped over, his gaze fixed on the hotel. Is that your bad leg again? Yeah, Moxie groaned. But it's still faster than yours. She managed a weak grin. Danny laughed. A real one. Bright, brief, alive. The sound cut through the Overlook's death grip. Behind them, the Overlook pulsed. One final scream burst from its roof, and then came silence. Not gone. Not asleep. Waiting. They didn't stray far. They made it only as far as the lower access road, several hundred yards from the hotel. It was just enough distance to escape the weight of its walls and the memories trapped inside them. The Overlook still loomed above them, silhouetted against the storm. They remained close, watching and guarding. The night was too quiet. The kind of silence that buzzed beneath the skin. Moxie, Danny, and Don Gato crouched together in the snow. Danny pressed his back against Moxie's side, one hand buried in her fur. Beside Don Gato, the cracked emergency radio released a final burst of static. Then it went silent. Don Gato's ears twitched. "It's quiet," he said. "Too quiet," Moxie growled. "I don't trust it." Chapter 9. The Last Stand. Headlights appeared through the falling snow. At first, they looked like twin suns breaching a black horizon. Moxie, Don Gato, and Danny squinted into the glare, half expecting the lights to disappear the moment they acknowledged them. They did not. A snowcat emerged from the storm and moved slowly along the lower access road. It stopped a short distance away, its engine humming low and steadily. A man stepped out. Not a ghost, not a memory. A ranger. His boots pressed into the snow. His breath escaped from beneath a scarf and drifted through the cold. He looked real. "We picked up a distress signal," he said. "An old emergency beacon. It shouldn't have been transmitting from up here, but the coordinates brought me to this road." He glanced at the cracked radio beside Don Gato. "Thing is, those old beacons haven't worked in years. This one cut through the static like it wanted to be heard." The ranger knelt beside Danny. "You okay, kid?" Danny nodded slowly, then looked back toward the Overlook. The ranger followed his gaze. "You came out of that place?" Danny nodded again. The ranger's eyes moved to Moxie and Don Gato. Disbelief flickered across his face before giving way to something resembling awe. "And those two?" "They saved me," Danny said, "and they're going to help me save my mom." The ranger looked back at the hotel. "Your mom is still in there?" Danny nodded. "We have to go back." The ranger hesitated. The Overlook stood in unnatural silence, ominous but not dead. Don Gato stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the hotel. "We're going back." His voice held no hesitation, no fear. The decision had already been made. The ranger's eyes shifted directly toward him, as though he had understood every word. Moxie moved beside Don Gato. Danny straightened, gathering what strength he had left. The ranger watched them for a moment longer than seemed natural. Then he opened the snowcat's rear hatch. "Then get in," he said. "I'll take you." Inside the snowcat, the heater blasted warm air like a blessing. Danny sat between Moxie and Don Gato, his eyes half-lidded and his hands buried in Moxie's fur. Exhaustion clung to him like a shroud, but beneath it remained a flicker of determination. The ranger drove in silence up the access road toward the hotel. The Overlook grew larger through the windshield. Its dark windows watched their approach. The air inside the snowcat thickened, heavy with the same familiar oppression they had just escaped. Don Gato's ears twitched. Something was wrong. Moxie sat up slowly. "It's not over." The engine's pitch dropped. The windows darkened. The ranger looked into the rearview mirror. His reflection smiled. He did not. Don Gato rose slowly, his fur lifting along his spine. The ranger's face began to change. His weathered features softened and ran together like wet paint. His scarf became a bow tie. His heavy coat darkened into a perfectly pressed tuxedo. Grady sat behind the wheel. His smile was oily and triumphant. "You did say you needed to return to the hotel," he said. Moxie lunged toward him, but her paws passed through the driver's seat. The steering wheel dissolved beneath Grady's hands. The windows stretched upward, becoming tall panels of mirrored glass. Danny stared as the snowcat disappeared around them. The ranger wasn't real? "There was never a ranger," Don Gato said. Danny looked down. The cracked radio still lay beside Don Gato, untouched by the dissolving illusion. A faint hiss of static escaped from its speaker. "What about the emergency signal?" Don Gato watched Grady's reflection multiply across the glass. "It may have reached someone," he said, "but the hotel answered first." The heater's warmth became the breath of the ballroom. The hum of the engine softened into distant jazz. The metal floor changed beneath their paws and Danny's feet, becoming polished parquet. The snowcat had not carried them back to the Overlook. It had been the doorway. The ballroom of glass. The last traces of the snowcat dissolved. They stood in an endless ballroom where every surface was a mirror. Each reflection showed a different version of the Overlook. A labyrinth of madness. Grady appeared in every mirrored panel. His laughter rippled through the ballroom. "We never close," he proclaimed in that transatlantic accent of his. Moxie lunged, jaws snapping through his illusion. He dissolved into mist. But others arrived. The twins, the woman in the tub, Grady. The mirrored faces of everything they'd fought, defeated, survived. The Overlook was throwing its worst at them, refusing to let go. Don Gato slashed one. It turned to smoke. Moxie tackled another. Gone. But the mirrors held firm, multiplying the threat. The Overlook's power seemed to be growing, feeding on their fear and exhaustion. Then came a sound. Step, drag. Step, drag. The return of Jack. A figure stepped from one of the mirrors. Not spectral, not smoky. Solid. Jack Torrance. Alive. But not himself. His face was smeared with soot, his eyes glowing faintly red. Not the gleam of a ghost, but something worse. A man no longer steering his own body. His boots left blood-melted tracks across the ballroom floor. He stepped fully into the room, dragging the axe the hotel had returned to him. Not fetched, not carried in. The hotel gave it back, as if it had always had a say in who held the handle. "Danny," he rasped, dragging the axe behind him. "You always ruin things." Moxie halted mid-step, muscles bracing, lips curling into a growl. Her fear was not for herself, but for the boy behind her. Don Gato's tail lashed like a whip. "That's no longer your father," he said. "That's the hotel wearing him like a coat." Jack swung the axe. Moxie leapt. The blade missed by inches, slamming into the mirrored floor. Glass spiderwebbed outward. The ghosts howled from every reflection. But this was different. Jack didn't vanish like the others. He bled. He panted. He roared. "He's still alive," Moxie barked. "We can stop him. We have to." Don Gato darted in, claws flashing. "Then don't hold back." They fought. Jack lashed out with rage, not skill. Moxie and Don Gato danced around him, wounding, drawing his fury. His swings slowed, his chest heaved. And then Danny stepped forward. Jack advanced, raising the axe, but then he hesitated. His body jerked, like a marionette mid-tangle. The weapon dropped an inch. His face twisted, not in rage, but pain. And then his voice changed. Softer, cracked, human. "Danny?" he said. Just that. Fragile. Real. Danny blinked, rooted in place. Dad? The rage behind Jack's eyes flickered. Something else pushed forward, something older, sadder. Please, Jack whispered. I can't hold them back. Not much longer. Please, release me. Don Gato stepped forward, voice low but certain. That's him. He's still in there, fighting. But they're too strong. Jack's whole body snapped. The softness vanished from his face. The red glow returned to his eyes, and the axe rose again. The Overlook had reclaimed him. The ballroom shuddered. Mirrors cracked. White light flared from beneath Danny's feet as the shine pulsed through the room like a storm. Moxie charged. Don Gato followed. Jack raised the axe, but his arms began to tremble. The blade stopped above his head. His face twisted as two forces fought for control of the same body. The red light in his eyes flickered. No, Jack whispered. His hands opened. The axe struck the floor. Jack dropped to his knees, his breath ragged. When he looked at Danny again, his eyes were his own. I won't let it use me again. The floor cracked beneath him. Dark hands formed within the opening and wrapped around his legs. The hotel pulled downward, furious with the vessel that had resisted it. Jack looked at Danny one final time. Run! The floor gave way. Jack disappeared into the darkness. The scream that followed did not belong to him. It belonged to the Overlook. Danny rushed toward the opening. Dad! Don Gato moved in front of him as the crack sealed itself. Danny stood motionless, staring at the place where his father had disappeared. The silence had barely settled into the ballroom when the lights flickered. Glass cracked, mirrors buzzed, and from one fractured pane, thin as a razor's edge, a figure began to emerge. At first it was only a silhouette. Then light wrapped around it, forming the suggestion of a man. A man with burning eyes. A ghost. A memory. Jack Torrance, what remained of him? His form was translucent, rippling like heat above pavement. His clothes were torn in impossible ways. The axe in his hand no longer chipped wood. It passed through reality like a whispered thought. Moxie growled low. He's back. Don Gato narrowed his eyes. No, that's not Jack. That's the hotel's last card. The ghost's eyes found Danny. You! It hissed, its voice warped, layered, wrong. Not Jack's voice. Something distorted and cruel, stitched together from memory and malice. The Overlook had fashioned his image like a mask, calculated to confuse, to wound, to twist Danny's hope into fear. It lunged. The ballroom warped, walls bending inward, chandeliers spinning. The axe swung through the air, not cleaving flesh, but slicing through memories. Moxie leapt between Danny and the spectre, her body a shield. Don Gato flanked, striking at the phantom with claws that passed through fog and illusion. But Danny didn't fall back. He stepped forward, calm, steady, eyes on the thing that wore his father's face. I already said goodbye, he whispered. The ghost faltered. The Overlook groaned. The air pulsed like a failing heartbeat. Then the ghost fractured. Lines of white light traced through it, like ice breaking on a pond. The figure's mouth opened wide, silent now, powerless. And then, with a sound like shattering glass, Jack's image was gone. The hotel exhaled, and all was still. Danny looked at Moxie and Don Gato. We said we wouldn't leave without her. Don Gato gave a single, solemn nod. And we haven't. The quiet was brief. Don Gato's ears perked. Danny looked up suddenly. She's here, he said. I felt her. I see her. They moved, through what was left of the ballroom, past flickering bulbs and half-collapsed beams. Behind a splintered column, half buried in plaster and dust, lay Wendy. Her eyes were closed, her lips pale, but she was breathing. "Mom!" Danny dropped beside her, cradling her head. "Wake up! We're here! You're safe!" Wendy stirred, slow and sluggish, as if surfacing from a long and terrible dream. Her eyes fluttered open, first fogged, then sharp. She blinked at the bulldog's snout, hovering close to her own. A deep breath, a flicker of memory. "You found me," she rasped. Danny squeezed her hand. "Her name's Moxie," he whispered. "She never gave up." Moxie licked her cheek once, then sat protectively by her side. Don Gato stood at Danny's shoulder. "She's all right, but we have to move. Now." The walls groaned again, this time not with anger, but collapse. Danny helped Wendy to her feet. She leaned heavily on him, legs trembling. Together they made their way through the ruins, mother, son, bulldog and cat, as the Overlook came apart behind them. Chapter 10. What Survives? The Aftermath. They stumbled through the shattered front doors and onto the snow-covered drive. Danny supported his mother on one side, while Moxie pressed against the other, helping keep her upright. Don Gato followed close behind, watching the hotel as pieces of its roof collapsed into smoke. They continued down the lower access road until the Overlook's presence began to loosen its grip. Then they entered a hush. The change was immediate. The roar of the hotel faded behind them. The storm weakened. The cold remained sharp and unforgiving, but it was real. For the first time since entering the Overlook, the mountain was silent. Danny stood under a sky pricked with stars, the wind cutting across his face. His mother leaned against him, half conscious but breathing. Moxie stayed close, shoulder to shoulder. Don Gato sat at his feet, tail curling like punctuation. "I told him no," Danny said quietly. "The hotel, my dad, all of it. It offered me everything. No fear, no pain. I said no." No one answered. They didn't need to. Moxie pressed against Danny's side. Don Gato gave a low, thoughtful hum, something like approval, something like grief. Behind them, the Overlook released one final whisper and fell silent. The Overlook had vanished behind a shroud of trees and smoke, its presence fading with every step they took away from it. It was not gone, but it was broken, dormant. Its hold on Danny and the mountain had been severed. For now, that was enough. The long ride home. Snow blanketed the world outside the ruined hotel, a pristine white canvas that seemed to erase the horrors they had left behind. The stars above were real, no longer distorted by memory or malice, but distant and cold, witnesses to a battle fought on a scale they couldn't comprehend. The air felt colder but purer, as if the mountain itself had exhaled something long held in its lungs, a sigh of relief, or perhaps a final, shuddering breath. They moved slowly, carefully, each step a victory against exhaustion and lingering fear. Moxie led the way, limping but proud, her body battered but her spirit unbroken. She was a beacon of determination, her low growls a constant reminder of the danger they had overcome. Danny helped support Wendy, his small frame surprisingly resilient, his steps unsteady but growing stronger with each breath. He kept one arm around her, glancing up often, as if afraid she might slip away again, his eyes constantly scanning her face for signs of returning life. Don Gato brought up the rear, his usual swagger replaced by a weary vigilance. He glanced back just once at the collapsing hotel, his gaze lingering on the swirling smoke and falling debris. A sense of unease still lingered, a feeling that the Overlook's influence might not be entirely contained. but he pushed it aside. Focus on the living. The Overlook had vanished behind a shroud of trees and smoke, its presence fading with every step they took away from it. Not gone, perhaps, but broken, dormant. And for now, that was enough. The descent. The rescue crew met them at the base of the trail, their snowcat a beacon of warmth and safety in the desolate landscape. They were not ghosts, not illusions, but real humans in parkas and boots and radios, their faces etched with concern and a healthy dose of disbelief. The rangers wrapped Wendy in thermal blankets, their movements swift and efficient. They checked Danny's vitals, their expressions shifting from professional detachment to awe as they registered the boy's resilience. And then they gave Moxie a careful look, awed by the scarred but noble bulldog at the boy's side, her fur matted with snow and dust, her eyes burning with a fierce protectiveness. "She's not just a dog," Danny said hoarsely, his voice cracking with emotion. "She's the one who got us out. All of us." He clung to Moxie, burying his face in her fur. Moxie nuzzled his elbow, her tail thumping weakly against the snow. The warmth of his gratitude was a balm to her weary soul. Don Gato sat just behind them, silent, tail curled around his paws. He watched the scene with a detached curiosity, his gaze sharp and assessing. "Is that a cat?" one medic asked, confused. He blinked at Don Gato as if unsure if he was real. Danny grinned, a genuine smile that chased away the shadows in his eyes. "That's El Señor Don Gato." He said the name with a reverence that made Don Gato's ears twitch. The head ranger leaned against the snowcat, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold. His face was weathered, not just from wind and sun, but from time. "You two make a hell of a pair," he said softly, looking at Moxie and Don Gato. Neither animal responded, but both turned their heads, watching him.
Had a dog once, he said after a pause.
She followed me through 3 winters. Knew where I was going before I did. He rubbed the back of his neck. She'd have liked you, Bulldog. Then to Don Gato. And you. I don't know what you are, but thanks for bringing him out of there. Moxie blinked slowly. Don Gato didn't move at all. The ranger let out a quiet chuckle and pushed off the snowcat. Not much for conversation, huh? That's fine. The quiet ones usually have the best stories. Wendy. As they rode down the mountain in the back of a rescue truck, the heater blasting warm air against the biting cold, Wendy finally spoke. Her voice was weak, raspy, as if she was relearning how to use it. "I remember pieces," she whispered, her eyes fluttering. "Cold floors. Whispers that weren't my own. A room with no windows. And a darkness that wanted to swallow me whole." She shuddered, her grip tightening on Danny's hand. She turned her head slowly and looked at Moxie, then Don Gato. Her gaze was unfocused at first, but then recognition dawned. A flicker of gratitude in her eyes. "I remember fur, a paw on my shoulder, a warmth that pushed back the cold." She looked from Moxie to Don Gato. "You found me." Danny squeezed her hand. "We promised." Moxie thumped her tail once. Don Gato gave the slightest nod. Wendy leaned back against the truck seat, voice firmer now. "I wasn't there when you fought for us," she said. "Next time, I will be." Danny looked up at her, eyes wide with something close to pride. He held her hand, his small fingers intertwined with hers. He didn't speak, but his eyes conveyed a depth of emotion that belied his years. "You didn't give up," he whispered, his voice thick with unshed tears. "No," she said, her voice low but firm. "Neither did you." Her gaze shifted back to Danny, her love a tangible force in the cramped space of the rescue truck. "And neither did they." She nodded weakly towards Moxie and Don Gato, her gratitude finding its voice at last. Epilogue. The long way back. The snowcat carried them down the mountain, leaving the ruins of the Overlook far behind. Back at the ranger station, when the snowcat was parked and the nightmare fading into silence, Danny had asked one final favor. "Can you take them south?" The ranger blinked. "The animals?" Still shivering from the cold, despite the indoor heat. "They got us out," Danny said. "They'll get home on their own. Just get them as close as you can, please." Wendy stepped in beside him, her voice firm. "No questions. Just drop them near the Texas line." The ranger scratched his beard. "I'm not cleared to cross state lines with passengers like these. My jurisdiction ends at the Colorado-New Mexico border anyway. After that, they're ghosts." Don Gato gave a slow, knowing nod. Danny smiled. Wendy rested a hand on his shoulder. "That's far enough." Danny nodded. "They'll be fine." And the ranger did as he promised. No collar, no cage, no leash. After ensuring the boy and his mother were in good hands, he drove the remaining two companions, four-legged and unregistered, for hours through winding mountain roads. Moxie and Don Gato kept watch, sharing silent companionship. The landscape slowly shifted from snow-choked passes to rolling hills, and then the New Mexico border. Once they were on their own, they didn't take the same route back. There were no trains waiting, no sled dogs, no snowstorms howling in their ears, just blacktop, silence, and the slow, steady hum of tires. They moved from freight depot to freight depot, truck stop to truck stop, riding in the backs of flatbeds and produce trucks, sometimes beneath tarps, sometimes nestled between sacks of grain or bags of mulch. No one saw them. Not really. A trucker might have glanced in a rear-view mirror and thought he saw a dog-shaped shadow or the flick of an orange-striped tail, but no one stopped. It took 6 days, 2 thunderstorms, and 1 unscheduled 3-day stop in Oklahoma, but that's a story for another time. Eventually, Colleyville appeared like a memory too stubborn to fade. The trees were blooming again. The chicken coop stood where it always had. The screen doors on the porch creaked just like they remembered. And for a moment, just a moment, the world felt whole again. Then a Jeep pulled into the driveway. The Jeep door opened. Familiar footsteps hurried across the driveway. Then a Jeep turned into the side driveway and stopped beyond the stockade fence. From the backyard porch, Moxie and Don Gato heard the engine shut off. The Jeep's doors opened, followed by familiar voices and footsteps moving along the driveway. Moxie remained where she was. Her tail thumped once against the wooden boards. Footsteps approached the gate. The latch lifted. The stockade gate swung open, and Moxie's human mama stepped into the backyard. She stopped. For a moment, she simply stared at the 2 battered animals waiting on the porch. Moxie? Don Gato? Then she rushed across the yard, dropped to her knees beside Moxie, and wrapped her arms around the bulldog's shoulders. "You came back," she whispered. Moxie leaned against her, finally allowing the weight of the journey to leave her body. More family members hurried through the open gate. Familiar voices filled the backyard, calling their names and surrounding them with warmth. Don Gato leapt onto the patio couch, released a long purr, and narrowed his eyes at the setting sun. Moxie did not move. She did not need to. She was home.